So I think that gradual removal of myself in that piece of the process has helped me focus on other areas. It's also just built up a lot more trust and excitement for players who frankly want to have more responsibilities and take part in their own personal and professional growth. So just empowering people to do more on that end.
Welcome back to Growth Lab Sessions. I'm João, CEO of Stealth White Label Marketing, and my mission is pretty simple: to help marketing agencies grow and build sustainable businesses. Today, we're bringing in Jay Neyers, the founder of Lanter. So, Jay is a leading expert in Shopify Plus, website design, development, and scaling D2C brands. He has generated over 112 million in D2C sales and has built more than 538 websites. Jay knows exactly what it takes to scale D2C brands and grow his agency by building it to more than 7 figures annually. Jay, welcome to the Growth Lab Sessions. Are you ready to take it to the lab?
Let's rock, man. Happy to be here.
All right, awesome. So let's start things out by giving some background, right? Tell us your story.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm from Cincinnati, Ohio. I originally went to school for accounting and philosophy, and I had no clue what I wanted to do, but figured I'd pick things on the opposite sides of the spectrum and land somewhere in the middle. And in that process, I started to do some accounting internships. And once I started going into that world, I was just bored out of my mind. I remember going to the office every day, just so depressed about how is this my life? What am I doing in this shitty job and this outfit that I don't want to wear and this environment I have zero desire to be in? And it just really hit me hard. Like, I'm going to be graduating college soon. What is my life going to be? And so it was around then I started reading about famous entrepreneurs. And it seemed like many of them were in technology. So it hit me then I should figure out how to code. I should figure out how to get more into tech. And so I started off building websites, just building it for myself initially as a learning curve, as an experiment of sort. And shortly after that, a friend of mine came to me. They had a family business and said, "Hey, we need a new website. Can you build it for us? We'll pay you $1,000." And my mind just exploded, like, oh my God, people will pay you for this. And so that was like the first transaction I got that just got me into this rabbit hole of e-commerce. And since then, I've gone down a whole journey of just really living and breathing in e-commerce space. So shortly after that, I also co-founded a company. We were selling a fitness product on Shopify, Amazon, with distributors as well. That taught me a lot of being in a brand owner's seat. So we grew that brand from 0 to 25 million before eventually exiting. And then after I exited that, I started applying the skills that I learned from growing a business to helping other businesses grow. So started Lantern Soul shortly after that and basically have been doing that ever since.
That makes so much sense that you graduated in philosophy and accounting, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense as to who you are, looking from the outside, because you know how to keep a balance with life. You're not all about work. You're also about, what makes you fulfilled. You travel a lot and you also focus on the business side of things. And in terms of your journey as an entrepreneur, you also, it also makes a lot of sense. Like, I would say that's the optimal agency owner route, where you actually started a business, right? An e-commerce business. You were super successful at it. And then you started helping other businesses have a similar success, right? So it's not like you were a failed business owner that then went into the agency space trying to help other businesses, which is what a lot of people do. You actually had the success before going into the e-commerce space. And so it also sounds like when you started your agency, you had a lot of clarity around what you were going to be, who you were going to be helping, and what you were going to be helping them with. Is that correct?
Definitely, I had the foundation for it. The agency model is very different from like a product business. There's a lot of overlay just because I have that foundation from growing a business myself. But managing people, aka the agency side, is very different from managing physical atoms moving through the space. You're spending way more time on product logistics, product development, customer service, and now it's more about relationships, offers. I find it more personal relationship driven. But it definitely gave me the foundation for everything that I learned starting a business myself and frankly just being able to relate to other business owners much easier about understanding their pain points and be able to speak specifically to them about what they might be going through.
Yeah, for sure. But when you're starting an agency, right? Typically, when most people are starting agencies, they usually think about who am I going to help and what am I going to provide them, right? What results am I going to provide them? How did you think about that in terms of consolidating it and landing your first client? I think this context is pretty helpful for agency owners looking to start. Like, where do I start? Who do I help? What
Mm-hmm.
services do I sell? Do I do AI? Do I do, like, how did you consolidate that and launch your agency?
Yeah. For me, another key piece of that is your distribution channels. So how are you also getting clients? How are you finding people? Because a lot of it, what I've seen over the years is, we provide a variety of different services, building websites, SEO, paid ads. And we see a lot of fluctuations between the years in terms of one specific side of the business growing faster than others. So I oftentimes think about how am I getting new clients and acquiring those clients. Really, though, for website building is probably what I've been doing the longest. And so what I just felt the most comfortable in and had a lot of reference points to talk about. So honestly, I wish I could say it was more strategic or thought out. Really, it was just waking up and taking action every day. Very oftentimes, I find most businesses just have this sense of analysis by or paralysis by analysis and just
Yeah.
sitting on their hands and trying to construct a perfect offer versus just picking up the phone and making 10 phone calls and figuring out what problems are you facing? How can I help? So my, I'd say my skill has just been taking massive action and like right away versus necessarily fleshing out a comprehensive roadmap or strategy. It honestly wasn't as fleshed out as that, more so just hitting the phones, dialing people, just hitting the raw numbers. With the company, I did a lot with sales, so I had a pretty solid sales background. And yeah, I just learned a lot about building websites, so it was easy for me to talk to people and relate to them as well.
Yeah. So, a constant theme so far in the podcast series is that agency owners talk a lot about taking massive action, right? I think taking massive action is the number one thing that is sort of the silver bullet with all entrepreneurs. You just have to take action, right? You just have to either start talking to people, you just have to put yourself out there and go, right? Without waiting for things to be perfect, without waiting to have a brand guide, right? You start and then you improve. I think that's the theme that I've seen with agency founders and with entrepreneurs in general. And so, when you started landing your first clients, right? Did you package an offer together, or was it like, over the course of the first month, second month, third month? When did you actually package an offer and start pitching that to your clients?
It's an ongoing organic process. I'm still evolving my process and my offer. So it's never something you complete and just, okay, that's done. Move on to the next thing. My
Right.
philosophy is always just very iterative in terms of
Mhm.
I'm go, go, go. And then we're seeing feedback, seeing responses, learning things in the process and restructuring it. So even today, I'm still restructuring offers and figuring out what works best and how to deliver great results, have an organization that's profitable, able to grow, and ultimately do fulfilling and meaningful work. So I would say my philosophy has always just been iterate, like get something up. Even my first website, like when I first launched Lantern Soul, our website was awful, and I spent just more time focusing on client related work. So It's at least for me, it's just been continuously iteration. And I've had the mindset of approaching it from a very long-term perspective. I'm not viewing it as a short-term sprint. This is something that I want to do for decades to come. And so having that mindset in the background and just continuing to iterate has been my approach to it.
Yeah. So, not to digress very much, but what is Lanter Soul? Can you tell us about, how you came up with that name?
Yeah, so we're an agency. We predominantly focus on Shopify brands, but also do stuff with Amazon and other non-Shopify. But I'd say Shopify is the common denominator for most of it. The name came from inspiration. I do a lot of language studies. So as you mentioned in the intro, I've traveled for about the past 12 years, speak about 6 different languages to different degrees. And so I had always wanted to incorporate some level of language outside of English into the name. I really liked lantern as a metaphor because I oftentimes talk to owners who need a guiding light, need a source of light for how to lead them. And so I had that metaphor aspect. And then soul is Spanish and Portuguese for sun. And so I had this metaphor image of a lantern that is illuminated by the sun. So not just a small light, but the biggest light, and also that kind of a play on words of relating to like your soul, like alma. And so it had a play on words for that aspect. So that's how I came up with the name.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great name. Probably one of the greatest names I've seen. I love it. It makes so much more sense now because I didn't really stop to think about it, and now it makes all the sense. I mean, we're called Stealth Manager. We're a white label agency, right? So stealth is sort of on the background, under the radar, and I came up with that name in my pajamas in my living room. But we're sticking with it. And that's cool. So going back to the offer and sales, right? Because I feel like that's the journey of a agency owner. It's you define your niche, you kind of start defining an offer. You got to have something to start, right? To go and pitch. But how do you generate your leads?
Today, a lot of it is from Shopify experts, just being in that ecosystem. A ton of it's referral based. I've tested some things with outbound sales, but it's never really worked thus far, at least for me. Or alternatively, I haven't been able to dedicate enough attention to it to make it work. So really for us, it's just been inbound referral rate, getting listed in the Shopify experts ecosystem, and just doing great work that clients eventually want to tell other people about.
And so you have a website, and when you get referred, do people go in your calendar on your website and book a call? What does your sales process look like?
I try to get on the phone with people right away. So some people will book a call, or in our onboarding form, we'll ask for their phone number, email, just more information. We'll also try to qualify to get a sense of how big their business is. In the early stages, I was taking basically anyone and everyone who would talk to me.
Right.
Now we're getting more selective in particular about who we partner and work with. But going back to what I was previously doing, I had a lot of sales experience before starting Lantern Soul. And so I think sales has always been something I've been really good at. And usually I just try to get on the phone, develop a relationship. People like doing business with people that they like and trust. And so I find a big part of that is building rapport, building that dialogue. That's oftentimes easier to do on a phone call.
Yeah, for sure. And so there is a step before where you qualify the leads, right? Or you qualify the person you're speaking to. What does that look like? How do you qualify a lead?
We try to get a sense of how big their business is. So to give you like our packages typically start around 3K a month. And so if a business isn't doing at least 20 to 50K a month, it's probably very tough for them to afford our services unless they're a new startup that's getting VC funding. So understanding their monthly revenue is, I'd say, the main metric that I would look for, and seeing if they can even afford our services to begin with.
Right. And so you mentioned building rapport, right? Like if you could break down a great sales call for yourself, and I'm sure rapport is one part of the sales call, what are the other important parts that you'd say?
I think, like kind of double clicking into that real quick, I think understanding the root issues and understanding like truly where they're coming from. Because oftentimes what people tell you isn't what they're really thinking or if they're able to articulate it fully themselves. So asking a lot of questions and spending 80% of the time listening and 20% of the time talking, I find that's really key. And you can't really fake it. I think just having a genuine interest in the other person, learning more about their business, learning more about their backstory, what is their true goal? Oftentimes, like peeling back the 5 layers, that can be the initial like front laying problem of what they're describing, but there could be different layers behind that's actually the root of the issue. So I think just a lot of listening and asking questions and letting them do most of the talking.
Right. Awesome. So, sticking on this sales topic, right? I think that building rapport, getting into pain points, getting into desires, right? Where do they want to get to? What are the results? And then creating a tailored presentation with a call to action with a next step in the end. I think that's a pretty good 4-step approach to sales. What are your thoughts? Would you include anything else in that sort of 4-step layout or framework?
No, I mean, that's pretty similar to what we do. So I think that's a good one. And then the other thing I would just say is the follow up, making sure that you're staying top of mind. They're very oftentimes talking to multiple people. And so that's something that we also try to emphasize is staying top of mind. I also would say the other thing you can do is provide value. Very oftentimes, provide preemptive value without even being asked. Very oftentimes, if we see an awesome client that we want to work with, we'll first give them something free. So it's not enough to just say, hey, read our case studies for other people. What we might do is a free SEO audit or CRO audit of, hey, your website has some critical issues. Here's actually a design of how it could be. And people see that and like, wow, these guys knocked it out of the park. Other people just told me that they could do it. These guys took the initiative to show me some specifics. So I think just try to provide value as much as you can, and that's usually reciprocated.
Yeah, the law of reciprocation, right? I think that plays a big role in terms of not letting, if you're finding yourself, and that this is my opinion and my experience, if you're finding that a lot of leads are ghosting you after the first sales call, one thing that you could try, it could be for multiple reasons, right? But one thing that you can try is instead of just following up in an annoying way of like, hey, did you read the contract? Hey, did you read the proposal? It's like, no, they're not reading it because they didn't like you or because you didn't provide enough value, right? So one approach that's more soft in terms of follow-up could be to send value, right? So what were their pain points? Maybe they don't have a contract for their clients, right? You could suggest, I don't know, a lawyer that could help them out. Or maybe they're not sure about SEO strategy and you didn't give them such a clear strategy. Then you can create a custom one in terms of just an outline of what it's gonna look like. So they can also get a sense for what, the level of service you're gonna provide for them. I think that has helped us so much. And what is a standard practice in terms of our follow-up, we're always identifying pain points, desires, and then giving free digital products that we sell to them, right? And so I think also providing case studies is really interesting, but it's not one or the other, it's one and the other, right? Moving things along, how do you approach structuring your team at Lanter? So what does your squads look like, your business units? How do you look at account management, fulfillment, and general overall structure?
Yeah, this has changed a lot. To give you context, right now we're a team of about 25 people. Initially, we were a very flat organization of just everyone reporting to me, and we were at a size, previously when we were maybe 10 people, 12 people, it was much easier to have a count and tabs on what everyone is doing. Now that we've gradually grown, we've split up into a pod structure, so having 3 pod leaders and then each of them controlling a group of about 8 or so people underneath them. So what it'll look like at a smaller level is going to be different than what it looks like now, and then also what it'll look like as we grow to 50 people or beyond. So our structure currently is about 3 different pods, and they'll have a pod leader who you can think of like a management team, and then 8 individuals underneath each person that they are more of their direct reports.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Everything that you say just comes across as so much iteration involved, right? Why do you think iteration is so important?
I tell people all the time, I think the most important trait that I've seen is just persistence. I'm viewing this as I'm trying to play long-term games with long-term people. And so that's my approach to business and with who I want my team, clients I want to work with is I'm not viewing this from a short-term perspective. And so just kind of that mindset and just persistence, like even with the company that I co-founded that we grew, our first 23. Our first 4 years were very suboptimal. And then you hit that classic hockey stick growth of things taking off. And same things with Lanter and Soul to some extent as well. Not as dramatic as the product side of the business, but I'm seeing like things really take off after just the persistence and consistency. So I would say iteration is really how I approach business and life in general is just trying to get 1% better each day and letting those results just compound over time.
So, when do you look at a process and think this is the time to iterate this process?
You know,
Sorry about that. Let's go back to your change of organization structure, going from 10 to 25, and how your direct reports changed along the way. Like, at what points did you realize, hey, I need to iterate and change this because X, Y, and Z?
so my main focuses today, what I mostly do is sales and recruiting. Basically get new business and then bring in talent to help retain that business. Previously, I was doing way more on the account management and strategy. Now I've trained up and hired people who I trust and who frankly even do a better job than I previously was. So I think that gradual removal of myself in that piece of the process has helped me focus on other areas. It's also just built up a lot more trust and excitement for players who frankly want to have more responsibilities and take part in their own personal and professional growth. So just empowering people to do more on that end, and really just removing myself from the process more intentionally has been really key. The thing I always say to people is I'm trying to get to the next bunker and fill in behind me with what I previously was doing. How can I streamline this or turn into someone else's job so I can focus on the next big thing? Because my superpower is really focusing on big long-term strategy. Where we'll be going next is branching outside of just Shopify and e-commerce into other industries, whether info or local or just different business models completely. And that's really my strength is tapping into new markets. And so as I gradually replace myself in sales and recruiting, I free up more time to focus on those type of activities. So really just empowering team behind me and replacing myself in after auditing my time and figuring out where's most of my time going towards.
Nice. And so, you talked about creating long-term vision, right? I feel like when you're starting things out, you just need to focus on taking action, right? But as you start building up a team, as you start getting more confident in fulfilling for your clients, and having the operations work without you being involved in every single thing, you get a little bit more air to breathe, right? And so when you start getting a little bit more air to breathe, you start being able to come up with new ideas, to think about the future. You have time to go to a conference and chat with other agency owners, other business leaders, and think what could be next for you. But do you have any specific formats or frameworks for, creating longer term vision?
No, I wouldn't say I have a specific format. A lot of it is just organic discovery or development. I think brand is a really big focus. The number one metric we have for our entire team is number of reviews that we get. And so it's not even about top line revenue. It's more so what will make this brand recognizable and sustainable. And so I would say maybe, I guess like thinking backwards about it, having team alignment on long-term items. And in our case, that's been company reviews has been very helpful of just aligning team around a very specific metric that's quantifiable. And we came up with reviews because it compounds to the brand. It helps, gives us social proof when people come and see, hey, you guys have 500 some 5-star reviews online. It makes it very easy for them to say yes. It helps the brand start getting sales on its own. I don't do any outbound sales. People are just calling me and contacting me all the time because of that brand development. We also set up compensation and rewards program around it. And so our thought process is it's going to be impossible for a client to have a bad experience and then want to give us a 5-star review. And so all those metrics really around all those metrics kind of circulate around the dream outcome that we want for clients. And so I think focusing on that has been a key part of our success and growth, and having team buy-in.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. No, I love that. I've never heard about, defining metrics around the number of reviews you're getting online. Where are these reviews that you're getting online?
All over the place. So figuring out where people find you, it could be like with our Shopify profile, Google Business, Clutch, Good Firms. There's a variety of different platforms that help for capturing those reviews. You could also set up something like a Trustpilot account. And it just makes it really easy in sales calls when I can talk to people and say, hey, I've been burned by tons of agencies in the past. Why should I trust you? And I can say, hey, we have 500 5-star reviews. Go read those. And so it makes the sale way easier when I don't have to try to sell ourselves, and I can let other people sell for me. And all that compounds to the brand. So I don't have any plans to exit or sell. But if I ever did want to exit or remove myself from the business or sell the business, I now have a lot more assets around the business that'll make it a lot easier to transact and have it brand recognition.
Yeah. So what's the framework that you have internally to communicate those goals to your team? As well as, so let's start with the onboarding, right? You're onboarding team members. At what point do you talk to them around company mission, right? Company values, and then how do you, talk to them about their specific KPIs?
Yeah, again, going back to the theme of iteration, we're actually working on this ourselves. We actually just brought on a new hire to help with both recruiting and HR. This is our first hire of a position that isn't directly related to revenue generating activities. So frankly, we still have a lot that we're improving on this. But typically when we onboard a new team member, we have a document for our onboarding guidelines, go through our company wiki. We're a 100% remote organization. So we also take them through our communication guidelines and expectations. That's been really critical, because I often find communication is one of the challenges and pain points for 100% remote companies. And typically the review focus is brought up every week. We have a rewards program called our Triple Crown program. Essentially, team members get bonuses when they're partaking in projects where they complete the project on time or pass certain number of months of retention. That's crown number 1. Crown number 2 is getting a testimony or review. Crown number 3 is getting an upsell. So if they start off on web design, let's get them to SEO or paid ads or email. And so when team members essentially participate in an account and get 1 or 3 of those crowns, they get incentives and upside as well. So just making it very clear about what is the dream outcome we want to produce, and then rewarding them in those instances when those outcomes are produced.
Love it. Structuring that is so hard, right? And that is something that doesn't come night to day. You can change your demo process, but structuring your team, communicating company values, training and onboarding, that's a whole shebang that takes a couple years to nail down and constantly iterate. I think when you bring someone that's completely in charge of something, like having ownership over that, it makes things flow so much easier and happen so much faster. I want to go back a little bit to the reviews that you're getting, right? I'm curious for you to share some of the case studies that you have, one case study, two case studies that, the people listening can learn more about how you actually help e-commerces. So maybe you give us a glimpse of that to also, potentially get them excited if they are an e-commerce owner to contact you, and so they can visualize the work that you can produce for other customers and what you could potentially do for them.
Yeah, I'd say it was never intentional, but the area that I've done the most work in is in the fitness and wellness space. So, like I mentioned, I previously co-founded a fitness product that we grew to 25 million. And then some of our biggest accounts, like for one of them, we grew them from 3 million to 30 million in the fitness equipment space. Another business we grew from 1 million to 5 million. So typically those case studies and just talking about my previous experience with the company as well, really help allude to that. And those are typically a multifaceted endeavor. So doing things with their CRO, SEO, paid ads, email, or combination thereof. So those are typically the case studies that I point to in addition to previously co-founding a business myself.
Right. But, share a bit more about that, because you took a brand from 3 million to 30 million, right? It was multifaceted. So, can you share a bit more information on how you were able to do that?
Yeah, this is where you'll also need to have good partners. And this is where I like to find, ideally brands that have their own legs to stand on, and I can act as a multiplier. Because really what the ideal combination is a business owner who has some form of intellectual property, whether that be a specific product that they've invented or a process that's unique. It's very hard for me to achieve those results with someone who's a drop shipper or selling commodities. So a big piece of that is just finding the right partner. And then they can focus on where they're good at with the product and things like that. And I can focus on what we're good at, which is all things digital. So again, it's just a very iterative process. There wasn't like one single silver bullet. It was really just the compounding continuous effects of offloading all their time and attention from focusing on the website or from the growth channels, and then focusing on just product and product development and letting me handle all things digital.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, it never is so simple, right? I wish sometimes you could just press a button and get the results, but that's not what life is about, right? Life is about the journey, and life is about innovating, adding layers to your game. And then when you look back, you eventually see all the work that you were able to accomplish. But when you think about D2C brands when scaling on Shopify, right? What's the biggest bottleneck that they face?
After seeing 500 plus brands, I see so much variety. So there's a lot of variance in there. It's tough for me to say the biggest. Generally speaking, I'd say sales is, sales cures all problems. And if you're getting sales and profitable sales at that, generally you can invest in more activities. So the main things that I would focus on is your website initially. That's the foundation where everything's going to get built off of. That's your key focal point for branding, where people are ultimately making purchases. So you want to make sure you're not pouring traffic into a leaky bucket. So first, I like to make sure that the website and branding and positioning are all aligned, and then just really expanding on the top of funnel. Typically, top of funnel, we're doing things like SEO for long-term exposure, and then short-term would be more paid ads and traffic. On the paid ad side, we're typically experimenting a lot with whitelisting, developing custom landing pages, and just unique flows for how people come in. A lot of that will really come after you have a really deep understanding of customer demographics and speaking to those specific pain points. SEO, we're doing a lot with the content side, backlink building, and playing that long-term game in terms of the organic exposure. And then typically more middle funnel, bottom of funnel, we're doing a lot with email, SMS, custom landing pages, influencers, things like that.
Awesome. I love that. When you think about the, Shopify Plus features, right? What do you think is one of the, or maybe the top three most utilized features that other D2C brands should be using more of?
For Shopify Plus, I'd say the marketplaces is really great. The customizations that we can do and checkout, those have always been really great items as well. Those are probably the first two that come to mind.
Cool. So, moving things along over to the AI world, right? What are some of the ways that you're leveraging AI today for your agency and for your clients?
So one of our three core values is evolve. One of the things I continually emphasize to the team is that we got to continue to learn, change our processes, update. Change is often scary and resisted. People find comfort in the things that they already know. And so I find that really just emphasizing that what does change look like? It's uncomfortable, it can be scary, and just emphasizing how necessary it is step number one. What we're doing in the AI space is experimenting a lot with content creation, whether that be for ads, social media, other aspects. It's helped our designers streamline things. We've come up with entire brand style guides for brands for previously what would take us, a couple hours or a couple days into just a couple seconds. So that's been really cool to see. On the email and content writing and ad side as well, we've been generating customer profiles and coming up with essentially agents for individual brands and uploading a lot of documentation on whether it be the brand core values, history, tonality, other standards that they might have in like content creation, for example. And it's really just allowing us to do more with less and condense items that might have previously taken us a couple hours or a couple days into a much more efficient and streamlined process. And so documentation is really key here, where you have clear SOPs for clients, and just those are all really help to upload into these AI agents for you to give it the most context and understanding to give you the most outsized impact on whatever queries you have.
Yeah. Sweet. Yeah, I think, with AI, imagination is is the only thing blocking you from leveraging more of it, right? When you think about trends that you see personally, because you're in the agency, you have a lot of clients, what are some of the other trends besides AI that you're seeing generating a lot of success for your clients, and you think that other brands are sleeping on?
But the big trend, we're in the age of the influencer, and it's only getting more and more pronounced. So we do a lot with whitelisting ads, and typically 95% of the time, if we're running the same piece of content from the brand page versus a whitelisting ad, we see the whitelisting perform better. Even if it's a micro influencer and someone who has 1,000 followers, I'm not even talking about big accounts. Those have performed exceptionally well for us. And I see this continued distrust in big media, big corporations, and more of this age of influencer where people like relating to an individual. So I'd say that's one of the biggest things that we're leaning more into. And I really encourage more brands to continue to do and explore.
And for people that don't know, what is whitelisting?
It's essentially what you're doing is linking up an influencer's content page, so their Facebook and Instagram, to your ad account. So you're spending the ad spend, but ultimately the ad's being displayed under their name. The reason, and this is a win-win-win. It's ideal for the influencer because you're paying for free traffic for them. I was looking at one of our accounts, and we had sent this guy probably about 10 million unique accounts to his page. So you can imagine a lot of that results in new followers for them, new exposure. It's a win for the brand because we see better performance on that. And so the same piece of content running from the brand page versus running from the influencer's page, we see typically anywhere from a 20 to 70% lift on that. And then it's a win for the customer, assuming you're not peddling dog shit and people actually want the product. Then people are able to see the product and ultimately get benefit and use from it. So those are those triple wins that we looked at to get, and that's been one of the clearest case that we've seen with that.
And what's a typical pay structure that you set up with these influencers?
There's a lot of variety. It'll depend on their size and extent. I mean, we've had brands doing influencing. We've had brands working with celebrities such as Joe Rogan and Gronk. We've had brands working with people who have 1,000 followers that you'd never heard of. And the big names are obviously are helpful, but the small ones work just as well. They work really well as well. And so I'd encourage you to do both. Some of those could be paid placement models. Some of them can be commission structures. Ultimately, there's a couple different ways of how you can structure it. So there isn't really necessarily one way. It'll depend on the size of the account. But we try to really emphasize on the benefits that they're getting from it. And we include in that the free traffic and the exposure that they're getting.
But Jay, for other agencies or other e-com brands, is there one model that you would recommend or lean towards?
Not really, just because we don't cover that cost. So a lot of it will depend on the brand economics and what they're seeing with it. We'll help facilitate and guide that whole process, but just to be clear, we're not covering these fees or these costs associated. So a lot of it will depend on the brand size and extent. I would recommend starting with smaller influencers initially, and you can generally structure those to just be like commission style structure or something that you're not paying a ton for versus a big household name where you'll typically have to front some of that cash. But this is where having a great product is going to be the best marketing, for you. When you have a really great product, like in the example of Joe Rogan I mentioned, that actually wasn't a paid placement at all. It was just he just really enjoyed the product that we were providing. And so the best marketing is always going to be having a better product and doing product development and improving on that.
Awesome. Well, you've generated over 100 million in sales for brands. So, I recommend that people listening really listen to your advice of focusing on product, right? A lot of times you don't need to focus on more sales strategies. Take a step back, look at your product, fix your product, because that's going to make everything so much easier. And now I want to transition into the rapid fire round. And so the rapid fire round, right? You just answer questions in 1 to 10 seconds at most. And so what's the most impactful software or tool that you use for your agency?
I would say ClickUp, just because that's the central nervous system for how we organize projects and communicate.
How many niches is your agency involved in?
Every single one.
What's your average marketing spend for acquisition?
0.
Can you share one unique tactic you've used to acquire new clients?
Focusing on the long term, building out your brand reputation.
If you could automate one part of your business, what would it be?
The sales.
Which marketing trend do you think is overrated?
Overrated. I don't have one that comes to mind, honestly.
If you had to focus on only one marketing channel for growth, what would it be?
Meta ads.
What's your current revenue and how is your agency initially funded?
150K a month, self-funded.
Nice. It grew from the we last talked. Amazing. Congrats.
Yeah.
How do you manage cash flow as you scale?
Agencies are very cash flow positive compared to businesses. So honestly, that hasn't been an issue.
What's the size of your team and how do you approach hiring?
25 people. We approach it from play long-term games with long-term people.
And lastly, Jay, be honest, okay? What's the biggest bottleneck that you have today?
Recruiting and sales. Those are the two big areas I'm focusing on. If you have new revenue coming in and then talent to fulfill on those services, you can scale to infinity. So those are the two pieces of the equation.
Awesome. Well, Jay, this has been an incredible conversation. Thank you so much for your time. But before we sign off, can you give one piece of advice for agency owners looking to scale their businesses?
Play the long-term game. It's persistence. Continue to iterate. Don't look for the short-term win. Long-term games with long-term people.
That is some wise advice from a philosopher turned agency owner. And Jay, where can listeners connect with you and Lantern Soul?
LanternSoul.com. You can also find me on just about any social media platform. Jay Neyers. Happy to connect anytime.
Thanks for joining us, Jay. And for everyone tuning in, make sure to subscribe to Growth Lab Sessions so you never miss an episode. If you found this conversation valuable, leave us a review. And follow me on LinkedIn for more agency strategies. I'll see you on the next one.